Now, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to this episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Joining me on the phone, as always, it is connoisseur de la musique, Alan Niven. You're a connoisseur. How are you?
I am very well. Connoisseur sounds a little bit posh for me. I just like rock and roll, don't I?
Well, you know, hey, once a rocker, always a rocker. Which is a good way to bring us to our guest today. It is Cowboy Mach Bell from the Joe Perry Project, and he has a new book out called Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker. And this one's kind of interesting. When Joe called him up to join the band, he started a diary. In 2021 we call that a journal. He was journaling. A diary. And he wrote down, all this stuff. Joe said this, Joe did that. We went here, we did this rehearsal, that rehearsal. We played this town, that town. And he kept this diary every single day until Joe said, hey, guess what? I'm rejoining Aerosmith. Gotta go. See you later. Bye. And the book stops. And it's a fascinating story. You can go over to oncearocker.com to pick it up. On Amazon they have it, but they also have the paperback, the audiobook, the ebook. Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker by Cowboy Mach Bell. But let me ask you this. Did you keep a diary of what was going on back in your day? Because I'd love to read the Guns N' Roses chapters.
Of course I didn't. I was not going to accumulate incriminating evidence for the benefit of those who might want to use it later. But let's go and find out the incriminating evidence on Joe Perry.
Yeah, and there is some. So here is the one and only Cowboy Mach Bell. We are speaking with the one and only Cowboy Mach Bell. You might know him from his days with Joe Perry and the Joe Perry Project. He has got a book, a fascinating book called Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker. And yes, that was, of course, the name of Joe Perry Project's third album, which, of course, featured Cowboy. Bonjour, Mr. Cowboy, as we say in Montreal.
Hey, thanks for having me aboard, Mitch. Really excited to be on the show.
It's funny the way, just with the name Cowboy, it's just that we have a real popular real estate agent around where I live who I think is just called Cowboy Boyd. And so I'm seeing his signs in my head as we're talking. But
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. It's Cowboy Boyd. And of course, it's all in French. But let's talk about this because, I'm a huge Aerosmith fan. And I remember very, very specifically. Now, of course, you weren't in the band here on the first record, but I was down in New York City with my mom. We had gone out to see the Eric Carr play with Kiss at the Palladium. First showed in July of 1980. And I went to whatever record store and I bought Let the Music Do the Talking on vinyl. And before I went to see the Eric Carr debut performance with Kiss, I sat at this person's apartment and listened to the vinyl of Joe Perry. And of course, a couple of years later, you joined the band. So talk to me a little bit about that. The band goes through 2 or 3 singers right at the beginning. How did they get to you? Was it auditions? Were you hanging around? Were you a buddy? How does Joe get to meet Cowboy?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mitch, because Joe is not, he's a lot of things, but he's not really a social butterfly, or at least he certainly wasn't back in that stage of the game. And his band, the lead singer was like a revolving door situation. He had that great first album, and Ralph just hit it so well, as you remember on the record, but I don't know, different physical or mental problems. Ralph wasn't really able to stay as a touring member of the band for very long at all. So,
and he passed away in 2014.
Yeah, sadly. What a voice, He went on to work with Kim Simmons and Savoy Brown after the project. But Charlie Farron was a terrific singer in a band, Balloon, that was playing the New England area and New York, going up to Canada, doing the same thing that my band Thunder Train was doing. I'd been the lead singer with Thunder Train for about 5 years, we had, names in our area. And so Charlie did do an audition to get his spot as the second lead singer on the second I've Got the Rock and Rolls Again album. And, that was a great album, and they toured, did a lot of really big shows in that era of the project because they were managed by Don Law, who was, he's like a huge concert promoter. Now he's with Live Nation, like the CEO of that. Anyway,
everybody's with Live Nation. They bought everything.
Yeah. Luckily, when I was with Joe, it was long before all that stuff happened. It was much more of the Wild West of rock and roll, the days of once a rocker, always a rocker. Anyway, Charlie was terrific, and he was so terrific that he figured he could get his own record deal and do his own thing. So he didn't last very long in the project either. So that's how I ended up. It was actually, it was through the management that picked up Joe. Everything kind of fell apart for Joe Perry. Charlie Farron left the band along with David Hull, the bass player from the first two albums.
Here's a fun fact. I actually saw Aerosmith play with David Hull somewhere late 90s, early 2000s because Tom Hamilton missed a show and David stood in.
That's right.
Yep. And I have pictures.
Tom, had a battle with health issues, and yes, David is the man. He can come in and do that job, and has done it a few times. Anyway, David and Charlie left. Don Law dropped, just kind of let the project go because there wasn't much left of the project. It was just Joe and his drummer, Ronnie Stewart, and handed Joe off to this unknown guy called Tim Collins, a manager who had some smaller acts here in Boston.
Then he had Aerosmith, which is not bad.
Yeah, later on.
Yep.
But this is all early, before we would ever know that any of that would ever happen. So Tim, who was a little bit younger than me, knew me from Thunder Train, and my mentor, who helped me immensely with Thunder Train, was a guy named Earthquake Morton. Now, Earthquake was a big performer here, also in New England, but he switched to the management and business side of the business. And when Tim inherited the Joe Perry project with no singer, he said, "What the heck are we going to do?" And Earthquake Morton looked at him and said, "Mach Bell." And Tim said, "Book him." So Earthquake got me on the phone, and it actually was a little bit of I was scared, not scared to take the job, although it was huge shoes to fill. It was more, I was 29 years old. I had just come through 5 real rough years on the road, being that close to, being the next household name rock star, I thought, and getting doors slammed in my face. And, I'd had it, Mitch. I was like, I'm going to reform myself as a regular tax-paying USA citizen, and I'm not going to be a rock and roll singer anymore. And that's where my head was at the moment when the phone rang, and they said, "Hey, you want to be the lead singer of the Joe Perry project?" It's actually how my book opens, with that phone call.
Yeah. Well, okay, let me get into this book real quick here, because and we'll fill in the details of this story. But what I find interesting is that it's an actual diary. I mean, you sat there and you wrote what was going on what day and what your thoughts were. Talk to me about that. When you joined the Perry Project, or the Joe Perry Project, and went off with them, did you say to yourself, "Okay, I'm going to write down what's happening because I don't know, just to have my own memory of it"? Or were you always somebody who held a diary and always did journaling and stuff? And what was sort of that inspiration where you went, "Dude, I'm writing this shit down"?
Couple things together. Yes, I did have experience writing journals, and I'm a lead singer-songwriter, so I knew how to hold a pen. But what happened was, when I showed up to audition for Joe, also in that room was Brad Whitford, who had quit Aerosmith a year earlier. Of course, Brad Whitford being the other guitar superhero from Aerosmith. So I'm walking in there along with Danny Hargrove, the brand new bass player who they just hired the day before me. And I walk in, and there's a microphone set up between Brad Whitford and Joe Perry. And I'm going to, sing Same Old Song and Dance and let the music do the talking and 6 other songs. That all sounds great and scary, but what was also happening was Joe, after what had happened with his band and also personal things going on in his life with his wife Alyssa at the time, he was in obviously bad physical and mental shape. And
well, let me just take you up on that for a second, because I'm a big fan. And I know the Aerosmith thing, and in the 80s, the late 80s, from Done with Mirrors onwards, my entire life was Aerosmith, just for that 5-year period. And the story was that when we got to Done with Mirrors, Joe Perry was essentially living on a park bench, and he had lost everything. all the cocaine and all that stuff had caught up to him. And eventually that's why they decided to do the reunion, because it was just like, listen, this guy's going to be homeless otherwise. How accurate was that depiction of Joe is down and out? Here's the guy from Aerosmith, Walk This Way, Sweet Emotion, Rocks from the 70s, to being the guy that rumors were was living on a park bench.
Pretty damn accurate, Mitch. It's one of the reasons we worked like hell. They kept us out there and could put us in the Red Roof Inn, so we had a place to stay. I had a girlfriend, luckily. Joe didn't always have a girlfriend, and I won't say he was on the park bench in the Boston Common, but he was crashed out at WBCN, the radio station, in a chair in the corner of the waiting room. People knew him there because they're playing his records every hour. But here's poor homeless Joe, just crashed out, and he was definitely couch surfing and in a really bad way. That's what my book is. A lot of that is going on at the same time that we're trying to get a record deal. We scraped for a year and a half with no record deal, out playing shows with this band. Nobody knew who we were, and no deal, untested management, very hand-to-mouth existence, no money. We did it all out of a little van. Just like going back to high school days, like going back to Aerosmith the first time I saw them back in '71 in that van that you see on the TV show with the guy painted on the side of it. We didn't have a guy painted on the side of our van, but otherwise
you couldn't afford the paint job. But yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So
so you jump into this Dodge van, right? And you now. Let me ask you this, because you join him, Tim Collins, who ended up feuding with Aerosmith after many years. He tells you, okay, you gotta join, and so on and so forth. Do you look at this and say, wow, it's Joe Perry of Aerosmith, and have some kind of starstruck moment like, wow, I'm with the guy who fucking played on Rocks? Or do you look at him and go, wow, what a desperate, sad character. I mean, look at him. I'm going to help him get his life back. I'm going to build this machine with him. What were sort of your impressions of him? Or he's the big superstar, or, wow, this guy's going to need my help?
Well, I got to admit, I was always starstruck by Joe Perry at his worst. I saw him the first time I saw him when I was 17 or 18 playing at the Teen Center. I knew that I was seeing something totally outside of anything that I'd ever seen on a local Teen Center type stage. I had seen, I'm a little older than you. I saw Hendrix, I saw Jeff Beck with the Jeff Beck Group. I saw these guys, but who blew my socks off. Not too many, but I did see some of these guys.
But I saw Kiss, which really.
I know you saw Kiss.
Really? I mean,
when you were 13.
Jeff Beck or Kiss? Come on.
Yeah. But no, it's all. It doesn't matter who it is when you're 13 or 14 or whatever that age is. Those bands have Joe definitely made his mark on me. So, but also I knew that I had, even though I was unknown and not the greatest rock star to ever come down I did know that I could write lyrics, I could work fast, I could work efficient, and I immediately, and Joe, even at his worst, was still scratching out killer guitar riffs like the Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker riff, which he was playing the first time I walked into the rehearsal room, and which I immediately started to hang lyrics on so that I could have I wanted to write a song with Joe Perry. I didn't know if I'd be in the band for a week. I didn't know if Joe would survive for a week at that point. So that was another reason I wanted to start writing in a journal. Because, he looked like he was 1 foot in the grave when I joined the band, to tell you the truth. And I said, if Joe croaks in a month, I want to have this written down so I can remember that moment. Now the month turned into more months, and then it turned into years. And then, I was with the band for almost 2.5 years until Joe quit the band to go back with Aerosmith and broke everybody's heart in the band because, we put it back together from shambles into a pretty good rockin' outfit. From anybody that saw it back in those days will tell you. I don't know if it was all captured on vinyl, but we were a rockin' show, and we got around, and it was a most incredible experience. Here I am, however, decades later, and I still haven't gotten over it. I really haven't. It was every hour and every day with Joe and that band. It was like a pinnacle. So many pinnacles that Danny Hargrove, the bass player, and I spent years afterwards just staring at the wall trying to figure out what the hell just happened to us. And sort it out and go back and laugh and enjoy so many of those highs, because we didn't have a chance to laugh and enjoy them at the moment because the next curve in the roller coaster was coming right at you. You couldn't even finish the scream from the last one, and you had another scream coming up. It was great.
Oh, spectacular time. Sorry, let me just quickly talk to you about when we get to Done with Mirrors and unfortunately Done with your band. What was that like? Because you are building this thing. It is starting to take a little bit more space. It's getting a little bit of radio attention. Fans are coming out to the shows. Was it something very abrupt where, hey, because on May 12th, 1984, it's the last entry in your diary. Did you have a sense that this was coming? Like, did you see Tim Collins and other people doing stuff backstage going, why are they whispering? Or was it just like, hey, look, we're done?
Well, yes, but no. Here's a weird one. We were out on the road on the Always a Rocker tour. We finally released the record after over a year. We got a deal. We put out the record. We go out and we do the, whatever it was, 50-city tour, and we make it out to L.A., and the week before, I'd been, on the radio stations and shaking the hands with the MC. Now we're on MCA Records. That's who picked us up. And all of a sudden, our road manager pulls up to this house, and we're all on the side of the road and up in the hills of Hollywood. And Joe goes in. Where's he going? Oh, that's Shep Gordon's house. He's going to go in and have a meeting with Alice Cooper. And, we're all out in the van, the rest of the band, and we're just hanging around, and the minutes tick by, and then an hour ticks by. And finally, Joe comes back out, and nobody really says anything, but we're thinking, that's kind of interesting. What's going on? And then when we did get back home from that tour, the rumor was that Joe was going to put together a band to back up Alice Cooper, who was also, a lot of the rock stars were on the sidings in the early 80s.
Yeah, Cheap Trick was, Kiss was, Alice Cooper were, they all were.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin broke up, and just ended up taking off their makeup.
Hold on a second. So what I find funny is you roll up to Shep Gordon's house, and he just, it's like, we can't have those guys in here. They're not important. Was that really the vibe? Because that's kind of funny. It's like, you can come in, but those, no, they can't. Not the band. No. That's funny.
that was a funny thing about the Joe Perry project. Most of the time, it felt like a band. Like, you and me and our two guys, friends, we put together a band, and we kind of all have a say or whatever. Then that would abruptly change at certain times. It was very obvious that this is the Joe Perry project, and you guys are just who knows who the hell you are. You guys could stay out in the van. It didn't happen that often, but it would definitely happen where suddenly, our bass player, who's African American, used to turn to me and say, "What am I, black?" Because we felt like we were just like being overlooked. Joe, we came back to Boston, and then this rumor was out that Joe was going to go on the road with Alice. Now, Hargrove, my bass player, and I both knew that we had a bunch of dates already booked for spring for the project, and we figured, well, maybe Joe will go out and do a thing with Alice, make some bread. How long will it last? 16 dates or something. Who knows? At the same time, from the minute I joined the band, and from years before that when Joe left Aerosmith, of course, everybody in the rock community had been whispering, Joe's going to get back with Aerosmith. Steven needs Joe. You just watch. They'll be back together soon. This had always been going on. But, of course, I had to tune that out.
Of course.
I had to...
By the way, was there any chance that Joe was going to be Alice Cooper's guitarist? Because Alice Cooper, for a period in the 80s up until 86, so like 82 to 86, had, sort of de facto retired or de facto been out of the scene. But this was really an opening slot. It was not, hey, Joe's going to be Alice's guitarist. No, it was presented. It wasn't Joe is going to join the Alice Cooper band. It was presented as it's going to be the Joe Perry band with Alice Cooper as lead singer. Oh, okay,
kind of like the Hollywood Vampires, except they were going to trade off the superstars' names, of course.
Time out. So Joe would have been playing for Alice then. Alice would have been singing in front of the Joe. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, I assume, Joe would have learned, Under My Wheels and some other Alice tunes, and Alice might have learned Walk This Way or something, and they'd go out.
I'm kind of sad that didn't happen.
I know, it would have been cool, and we were fine with that. We figured it was going to be a one-off thing that Joe would do and then come back to the project. And in fact, right after the Always a Rocker tour, Joe did leave to go. I talk about it in the book because Joe's with me before and after, telling me how it went. He writes some songs with Alice, and they work for a few days. Then he comes back, and then we're back out on the road. We were actually up in Canada doing a short whirlwind Canadian tour. Everything was fine. We get back, and that's when I got called into the office. Usually they were going to yell at me when they called me into the office, but I was. I figured, well, maybe it's good news. Maybe MCA's put, ready for us to do the second album.
MCA has no idea what to do with a rock band, by the way. That is like the worst possible label for a rock band.
Oh, God.
When your rock band signs to MCA, that's when you should just go on a farewell tour. Just saying. They ended up with a lot of, when we were on the label, I agree with you. They sure didn't know what to do with us. And what they did with us, they fired us the day we began in the studio, and we had to fight to get back onto the label. We were dropped before we even recorded the record. But at that moment, they had Leonard Skinner, they had The Who, they had Tom Petty. None of those acts had started with MCA, though. They'd all, become famous with other labels, and then they ended up on the mega Universal MCA thing. We, on the other hand, were, trying to develop a new act, and it wasn't good. Anyway, I was hoping that it was either good news about the album, or maybe we're going off to Japan to do a tour. Instead, I get up into Tim's office, and there's Joe Pett, our drummer, Danny Hargrove, the bass player, who I didn't expect to see there. Tim sat us down and told us what was going to go down. And man, that was bad. I think maybe the other guys expected it, but like I said, I'd been wearing the blinders really tight, and all I was thinking about was writing new material and up and what we were going to do next. And hearing that Joe was leaving the band,
was incredibly crushing.
Yeah, I can imagine. And now, just quickly talk to me a little bit about Tim Collins, because he gets Aerosmith into whatever drug rehab, Alcohol Anonymous, whatever program it was, and he rules that band with an iron fist through the Permanent Vacation and years after. And then, of course, eventually the story ends with Aerosmith going, "Hey, get the fuck away from us," and it all falls apart. Was he showing those tendencies of being sort of I don't want to say a dictator, but just an iron fist ruler with these guys and reeling Joe in and I would suggest that he probably was very good for Joe, because he did straighten him out. He did straighten out Aerosmith, and they are something in 2020, probably in a large part because of Tim Collins' efforts. How did you see Tim? Is he a good guy or a bad guy in the story?
He's a good guy in my story. He was an odd guy, and I did see we didn't have enough money to all go off to Malibu to some dry out place when I was in the project. We didn't have enough money for a Fanta orange soda. But what did happen was Tim would suddenly get a new thing. Oh, sensory deprivation tanks. I'm sending you and Joe to the sensory deprivation tank place. They're going to stick you in a saline bath of water and close the lid in this tub, and you guys are going to float around for an hour, and it's going to, create some kind of a mental miracle. So we'd go and float around in the tub. And then a few weeks later, oh, I've signed you guys up. You're going to this gym to work on the Nautilus stuff, which was kind of a newer thing back then, going to a gym and working on machines. It's going to clear your heads and prepare you for, your next musical miracle. So Tim kind of, would get these bugs in his ear, and then he'd use us as guinea pigs. And, as you read in the Walk This Way book and Joe's book, that as the millions came rolling in with Aerosmith, they were being sent off to these different cure-all places by Tim. And, it did become kind of, I don't know if you ever read any of the stuff like with Brian Wilson and from the Beach Boys and his Dr. Morey, who kind of took control of Brian Wilson
But to be fair, Aerosmith was out of control. If you look at what they were doing in 77, 78, 79, that led to the dissolution of the band, they were out of control. I mean, I don't want to say they were children, but they were out of control, and you need somebody. There's Kiss with Paul Stanley. He had a therapist that did stuff with him, and Brian Wilson, and everybody likes to blame these people, but they sort of put the train back on the tracks in all the cases. So
he sure did put the train back on the track for Aerosmith. That was so unbelievably incredible what Tim did with that band. And
good guy, if you ask me. I mean, in terms of business acumen, and listen, Aerosmith wouldn't be here in 2020 without Tim Collins. That is my view on it.
Yeah, no, I won't argue with that. And you'll see when you read my book, I had this one little nagging thing. I owed some dental bills and some this and that, a couple $1,000s. It wasn't really a huge amount, but big enough for a guy in his 20s. I was being hounded by bill collectors and all this, and it was really making it hard for me to enjoy my life. And I went to Tim with my problem. This was right when I started the band. And he said, "You give me their numbers. I'll take care of it." I don't know what he did. I don't know if he threatened them or if he put them on a payment plan or what the hell he did, but those people never called me again, and it was just taken care of. Now,
listen, I've heard stories about managers like that where suddenly problems disappear. Just, I do want to remind the folks that if you need to pick up the book, or if you want to pick up the book, I should say, oncearocker.com. You can head over to oncearocker.com and pick up the diary. Let me move ahead and start wrapping up with this. But how do you sort of look back on it? My sense is that it's very favorable. It's one of these rollicking 20-year-olds having a great time. is it all good? I mean, yes, there's some good and bad, and some shows were better than others, and this, promoter probably didn't pay you, and there's some shit going on. But at the end of the day, here in 2020, how do you sort of look back on your time with Joe Perry? And does Joe still call you from time to time?
Well, I look back at it with great love and admiration, and I feel really good about it now. Having written the book helped me understand some of the things. Because when I wrote the diary, I kind of, after it ended, I put it on the shelf, and I kind of wanted to forget about it for a while, because it was a deep wound, having something you love just stop like that and be out of your life, and then see Joe do so well with Aerosmith. It was very hard. Joe was nice and invited me to come to concerts and things, but I'd go to a concert next to Joe and hear the roaring crowd, and I was supposed to walk out on that stage with Joe and entertain those people like I had for all those hundreds of times. But no, the big security guy would put his arm out and stop me, and suddenly I'm just another of the peons, and Aerosmith's up there killing it with Ragdoll, and I'm just like, I don't really dig this. I don't want to see my old flame with somebody else. This is hard. This is really hard.
It is, and this is going to sound completely and utterly obnoxious. But when I go to shows, sometimes I'm invited by bands, and sometimes they give you a pass, and you walk around, you go to the catering, and it's great. And there are other times where they just give you a one ticket, no plus one, and when you're just sitting there like in the fans, it's not the same experience. And I know it sounds obnoxious, like, oh, you got to go to a show, shut up. But I get what you're saying. It's just that when you've tasted the forbidden fruit and you're part of it, it's exciting. And then when you're not part of it, it's I don't want to say it's depressing, but it's just like, I'd rather just stay home if I'm not going to be part of you know what I mean? And yeah,
and that leads to your other question. Joe and I did keep in touch, but we don't really anymore. And sadly, for my mental and physical growth as a person, it's better that way. It's very hard for me not to get involved in Joe's life, and there's a lot of ways I can hurt myself by being too close to him. If I was to get back together with him, I most would love to get together with him like was the first time I ever met him, where we didn't say a word to each other. I just walked into a rehearsal hall, picked up an SM58. He tuned up his Telerat guitar, and we just launched into a jam, and we made music together. Now that I would dig. I would love to make music with Joe again. But, he and I were never great conversationalists anyway, and so that's where it's at now. I mean, I'm still a young guy. Joe's still a young guy. Maybe something will go down later. But so right now, we're out of touch. I'm hoping that he reads the book or listens to the audio book that we just put out, because I think he'll really. Charlie Farron's on the audio book too, and Danny's on it. So he would hear those voices again and hear their take on. And Earthquake, who was our emergency road manager, who showed up when our regular road manager got thrown in jail down in Florida. These are all people that from Joe's past. And frankly, I love Joe's book, but his tales about the Joe Perry project are kind of scant, because I don't know that he remembers that much about what was going on at that time. He was still in a haze. Pretty heavy haze through the years I was with him. He was great on stage, but he was quick to get back to his motel room, which worked out great for me, because Joe's the type of guy that draws lots of adoring girls and lots of people looking for a party. And so, hey, Joe had to leave, but the Cowboy's here if anybody wants to party. So I there was a lot of fringe benefits in working in the band.
Oh,
definitely
I can imagine.
No great paydays, Mitch, but everything except money So,
well, I can
there's
imagine.
a lot of things money can't buy. You know.
And you did, of course, co-write or write most of the Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker album. So you do have that and a feather in the cap too. But yeah, I can imagine that it must have been. Now, remind me, the other day on Instagram, I posted about a Canadian or a band touring in Canada, and you said, "Hey, the Joe Perry Project toured with them up there at that time." Who was that? I completely forget.
Couple you mentioned. One, the great one that I loved was Killer Dwarfs.
Oh yeah, listen, I'm friends with all those guys. They, Daryl and Russ, and those guys are fantastic. I'll have to put you in touch with them, honestly, because I was speaking to Daryl last night, actually. So,
wow, what a great show, and you know, it was just two boats passing in the night. I think we might have done a couple of dates with them. You know, you're really busy when you're working, so it's not like you get to hang out and talk about life. But what they did on stage, you know, we all just love the Killer Dwarfs.
Spinning on their head. By the way, Russ, who spent his career spinning on his head, unfortunately has had neck surgery and all kinds of issues, and his doctor told him not to spin. And I remember when he was telling me this, I was like, "Well, yeah, but you're 60. Of course you shouldn't be spinning on your head at 40, for Christ's sakes. Like, what are you doing?" What was the other one?
Well, there was Lee Aaron, who
yeah, of course. See, I can put you in touch.
We played Le Spectrum on St. Catherine Street, Le Spectrum, Montreal, with Lee Aaron. That was when we were on the Always a Rocker tour, so she was opening up for us. That was great. Frank Marino, we did a unbelievable gig with him up in Quebec City.
Wow. See, these are all people outdoors. I can reconnect you with. Frank lives about 20 minutes from me, so the last time I went to his house, by the way, I'm going to tell this story real quick. I'm at Frank Marino's house, and while I'm at Frank Marino's house, I have Brad Gillis and Joe Bonamassa texting me. So I'm sitting with Frank, looking at my phone, going, message from Joe, and I was like, this is the weirdest moment. Like, it's like the three guitar gods all at once. But yeah, Lee is great. She's got a Christmas album coming out this year, which you should probably check out. Yeah, and I'll be happy to reconnect you with all these guys. They're all great people. But
yeah, man, we love playing. You know, it's always great. Go up to Canada and play with these Rough Trade or the Spoons and Teenage Head. All these bands that we didn't see as much.
All but Teenage Head still exists. Rough Trade. What's her name? What's the lead singer of Rough Trade? Anyway, but all these bands still exist and they still play, except for Teenage Head. But I know the Spoons are still out there. I know Rough Trade's still out there. Carol Pope. That's it. Carol Pope.
Carol Pope. Yep. Are you familiar with a band called Rabbit, spelled with a W? WRABIT?
No.
They were from Toronto, I think.
Really?
Did a couple. I think they were on MCA, the great label, too. Yeah, they opened for us when we played in Caracas, Venezuela, of all places. And yeah, I was just throwing it out there. Anybody out there remembers Rabbit? I remember them, too. So.
Oh, I'm looking at it right now. The rock group Rabbit was formed in the late 70s. Members include Lou Nadeau, Les Paulhouse, David Alpin, John Albini, Scott Jefferson, Steck, and Gary Craig, and bassist Chris Wow.
Their band. There's like
band.
the Looney Tunes thing on the cover of one of their albums. You know, That's All Folks.
I'm looking at it. Rough and Ready from 1982 has a sort of a crazy looking rabbit on it. Wow. All right. There you go.
Yeah. So the Venezuela, going down to South America is a very interesting part of my diary and our adventures with Rabbit.
You taught me something. It says keyboardist Lou Pamanti. Credits include working with Triumph, Four Horsemen, and Santers. Wow. Mm. They shared a bill with Rush on a Canadian. Wow. Gary McCragan left to go to Max Webster. Wow, this is like the who's who of Canadian Never heard of these guys. Wow, that's
yeah.
amazing.
I mean, I knew that they were making some noise up there, and my friend from Kiel, Mark Ferrari, was reading my book, and he got in touch with me. I can't believe you mentioned Rabbit. I love those guys. And I was like, yeah, you're the first guy that's told me that you remember them. But yeah, I had both their records.
Wow, look at this. It says Chris Broadwick on bass had been lured away from his band Rheingold that included Lawrence Gowan. And of course, Gowan is, now in Styx. Wow. Yeah, six degrees of separation.
Me a little of Styx, some of their tunes. Interesting you say that. Yeah, well, there's a lot of names like that in the book of these bands and venues and radio stations and people. That's part of the fun of the journal. It's not just the Boston scene or the Canadian scene. It's like we were all over the place for the project, and every place had a scene. In some ways, they're very, whether it's L.A. or Detroit, there's certain things about it that are very similar from one to the next. But it's kind of fun because everybody that reads it tells me, I can't believe you mentioned, whatever town or school, and for whatever reason they can't believe it. It's got a lot of trivia in it. A lot of great trivia, and what's great is that it's a first person account. It's not something that you wrote 25 years later. You wrote as it was happening. Right. So it's authentic. And I'll have to say this as a compliment is I avoid a lot of the rock star books just because I'm like, dude, you were fucking on heroin. How are you going to tell me what you were doing on an August night in the summer of 1984? Like, calm yourself. But yours, you wrote it when you were there. So it's kind of easy to remember because it is what was in your head at that time. And so that's what makes it authentic, and that's what makes it a great read. So, folks, oncearocker.com, and of course, head over to Amazon. The audiobook is available on Audible. And there we go. As we say, as I slowly I'm losing my voice, I'm noticing. But as we say in Montreal, merci, Mr. Cowboy Mach Bell. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Yeah, that was great, Mitch. I thought I would enjoy being on your show, and man, you did not disappoint.
You see, I do my best, but no, I'm a big fan of this, and I really like, and I'll repeat it, I like the fact that yours is authentic, because every so often you get, like, you look at the Nikki Sixx's Heroin Diaries, and you go, how are you going to remember that? Or you get Ace Frehley's book, and you go, dude, come on, you were not sober. Come on.
Yeah. Well, that was, I was a lightweight, and so I could write.
Right.
And I think that was one of the reasons they put me together with Joe, too. They didn't want to get another, addictive type dude together with Joe. Joe had enough for the whole band. So, I was a lightweight, and I think it rubbed off in a good way on Joe and helped keep him going so he could have his fantastic rebirth with Aerosmith.
Yeah, and give me some of the greatest moments of the 80s. That Permanent Vacation album and
Oof.
And Done with Mirrors. I remember specifically buying Done with Mirrors, sitting at a place called Beaconsfield, the Small in Beaconsfield. There was a Sam the Record Man in there, and I bought the cassette and I stuck it in my mom's car's tape player, and drove all the way home. 20 minutes away, and I just loved that dirty, gritty sound. I know everybody goes, "Oh, it's not a good album." It's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. It's that moment. It's the moment that matters. It's not always the songs or the music. It's the moment, and we'll never forget that. Well,
it doesn't have the prom ballads. I'll give you that. But if you like the Aerosmith that's driven by guitars of Joe Perry and Brad Whitford, and I mean those
My
songs,
Fist,
Sheila,
Your Face. My Fist, Your Face. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
That's it.
And what's the first song on the album?
Joe
Perry Projects. Let them go ahead.
Let the music do the talking. And I remember seeing that dirty, slimy, fan-filmed video, and it was perfect because that's what Aerosmith was supposed to be in 1984-85. Had they done a slick Michael Jackson video, it would have been a total failure. That 8mm camera video, perfect. I don't know who thought of that. Yep. Maybe Tim Collins, but perfect.
Right. Yeah, and it fit their budget at the time too. I mean, it all worked out, and I love that album, Done with Mirrors, too. And it marked the end of them really as, a self-contained writing, performing machine after that. But it wasn't just them. It was the whole industry started to... I heard that great episode you did with that song doctor. I don't remember his name, a guy who worked with all kinds of acts.
Well, I've done a couple of them.
Included.
I've done Jim Valance. I've done Desmond Child.
Yeah. It wasn't either of them. It was somebody he had worked with the Scorpions. He had worked up in Vancouver.
Jim Valance. Jim Valance. Who?
Okay, yeah.
It's got to be Jim. Just trying to think.
Okay.
Who. I've done Holly Knight, but she's not. She was never a song dog. No, it's got to be Jim Valance, where they would call him in and say, "Oh, hold on."
Yeah. Okay, it was Jim Valance.
Yeah.
All right.
Jim Valance did Crazy World with the Scorpions.
Okay, yeah, it definitely was that one. Yeah, I was just listening I just had your show on. It goes from one to the next to the next. I might have missed who I was even listening to. I was just going, whoever this dude is, this is a really good interview.
Yep. Well, and by the way, thank you for listening. And that is sort of the concept of the show, is to go from, a songwriter to a book writer and not just always be the 80s hair guy and the 80s hair guy. Oh, look, another 80s hair guy. And I think that's what makes it compelling. But yeah, there you go. All right.
Great, man.
I am looking at the time. It's time to pick up the daughter. But yes, hopefully what?
Yeah, no, I said hopefully they're listening to some hair guy, and then it goes into my interview, and they get to hear mine. But hey, have a safe drive, and thanks so much for having me on Rock Talk. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
OnceARocker.com.
Yeah, and they will absolutely hear this. I'm going to promote it properly over the socials, and I think once they hear the story, they're going to want to read the book, because it's a great read. And here, I'm just going to quickly read here. It says there's hundreds of stories. We'll be crossing paths with Alice Cooper, Marshall Tucker, Stiv Stavers, I guess it was, Stiv Bators, and the Ramones. The Dead Boys. Did I No, I didn't. No. Who did I interview from the Dead Boys?
Cheetah Chrome, maybe?
Yes, that Cheetah. Yeah. That's the name.
Yeah, he's great.
Great guy. Anyway, thank you, sir. Merci. Have a good day.
Right on.